Mortal beings are hypocrites. Many claim that they're strong, that they won't let anyone toy with them, but these people are usually the king's fools, a joker within a deck, and all it takes is one ace to reveal that joker. Once the joker is discovered, they will typically act in anger, whether that be through violence or baseless insults, mainly because they still have this desire to come out on top. But once you become a joker, you'll forever be kept at the bottom of the deck. Look, it's okay to admit that we're wrong at what we act out. We can improve ourselves as people if we do. But for some reason, people see that as weak, and no one wants to be seen as weak. And that aspect, the desire to remain on top and be seen as the ace, is what makes us so easily manipulated. And no one understands manipulation, or revels in it for that matter, better than the being of darkness. Back during his mortal years, the being was a lying, cheating, manipulative person who didn't have any desire to prove that he was better than others, but instead to put those who thought they were aces back in their place. He gained satisfaction out of their embarrassed anger and envy. As soon as they would give him a certain look, he knew that he had won. With that being said, the being was never seen as an ace nor a joker, even though he had a way with words and a keen eye for self-righteousness. The truth is, no one likes a man who could bring anyone down a peg. They see him as a threat to their self-worth. So, one night, the jokers came together and followed the ace of a being to the local pub. He had a few drinks and did his thing, made a fool out of a drunk pervert harassing a lonely girl and left. After a few uncounted drinks, the being left the pub to stumble his way home. But before he even left the property, he was grabbed behind by the collar and slammed to the ground. He tried to look up to see the culprit, but after being pulled to the surface with a tipsy head, his vision was far too blurry to focus. He could see no distinct features. Yet, in the back of his mind, he knew who these men were. This day was going to come eventually. They kicked, punched, and beat him senseless as he was being covered in shades of black, blue, and red, each becoming more distinct after every hit. He began to lose consciousness. But before he was able to pass out, he had one last thought. That these men were only letting out their aggression. Another attempt to take the throne as the next ace. The being was wide awake now, chokes of pain being replaced with small chuckles that evolved into a full maniacal laugh. Some of the men backed off as they weren't sure what exactly was happening. Others only got angrier as they saw his laughter as an insult to them. One man had enough of the being's laughter and decided he wanted more than just a beatdown. He wanted to personally execute the ace. He pulled back with all of his might and slammed down his bat with a great force. The laughter stopped. The being's body only twitching now. The other men simply muttered to themselves. Was it worth it? Are we going to jail? What did we do? The man who swung the killing blow stood up slowly, hand shaking, eyes widening. He too realized what he had done. They all tried to scatter, but none of them would make it that far. Not because of the authorities, though. The killer tripped and landed face first in the dirt. He looked back to see his shadow holding his ankle. The shadow was waist up out of the ground, a completely black mass that had the same shape as his human, but with white eyes. White, worried eyes. The shadow was being held down as well. Several hands ripped out of the darkness and pulled the shadow down into the depths. The closer it got to the ground, the more the killer was dragged as well. And with each tug bringing the killer into darkness, the more the shadowy hands transformed into green, slimy tentacles. The killer looked up to see that each tentacle and his own shadow were connected to a single shadow, all coming from the ace's corpse. His body slowly got up, his feet seemingly craning his body up with all of his bones cracking. Once the ace was standing completely straight up, the darkness around his ankles surrounded the rest of his body. Once covered, the body began to stretch and contort in unnatural ways. He was becoming taller and larger by each second as those same green tentacles began to break free from this towering shade of black. This tower began to harden as light was finally able to reflect off of it. It formed into a shell similar to an insect's. His skeleton became an exoskeleton much like the engineers. As the attempted murderer was being drugged down to his new dark home, the being turned to him. Over a dozen piercing eyes stared at him, his mouth opening with a new set of piranha-like teeth. The last words his killer would ever hear before being drugged down into the endless abyss.
Jokers, stay at the bottom.
Now, how did the king discover his new ace? Well, that's the thing. He wasn't discovered by one of the king's men, nor was he invited to the castle like me and my brother. In fact, he came to the castle only a few moments before we did, completely of his own free will. Even to King Yarchich's surprise, as he didn't even know something like that even existed. But he accepted him nonetheless, regardless of his strange circumstances and origin. After all, he is a being of darkness.